Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This week it is Dyslexia Awareness Week, and so I thought what better time to do a video on what dyslexia is. And also what dyslexia isn't. This video is really going to be for all of you who might be new to the club of dyslexia, and I hope that it also sort of helps some young people out there, because I think sometimes it's really hard when you're trying to explain to other people who aren't dyslexic, what dyslexia means. I think it could be really good for you to watch this video and take away some key points. What are the key points that you have to get across to other people to help them understand what it is like for you. I'm going to go through all the signs and symptoms, but I want to keep it really positive. I think if there's anything to take away from this video, it's that, even though we have dyslexia for life, it's really not a life sentence, and it doesn't have to be a huge deal. It's just something that is part of who you are and part of your identity. So the word dyslexia actually comes from ancient Greek, and it literally means trouble with words. Now, I'm sure whoever came up with the word dyslexia thought they were being so funny. It's really ironic that as dyslexics, we can't actually spell our own condition. I still can't spell dyslexia. Basically, it's a learning disability that affects our reading, our writing, and our spelling. So I think one of the most important takeaways from this video is that dyslexia does not correlate with intelligence. Now, what that means is when they actually test for dyslexia, what they're doing is they're testing your reading and writing and spelling skills, and they're trying to match it up to where your IQ is. And if your IQ, your intellectual intelligence, right, is maybe up here, but your reading skills are down here for your age group, and those two things don't match, then that's, a miscorrelation. They don't match up. Where your reading and writing levels should be don't match with where your intelligence predicts them to be. It's not an intellectual disability, which is why I talk so much about how we're not stupid, we're not lazy, any of those things. It doesn't actually affect our intelligence. It just means that we're wired differently. Two words that you're going to hear a lot in the dyslexic community are encoding and decoding, okay? Now, encoding means writing, spelling, actually, processing the information and putting things into words. Decoding is looking at words, being able to manipulate language and read and, break those words down into sounds. That's what decoding is. So dyslexics have trouble both encoding and decoding words. Now, dyslexia is a neurological condition, okay? Neuro meaning brain, it's all in our brains, okay? It has nothing to do with eyesight. They've actually studied the comparison between a dyslexic brain and a non-dyslexic brain using, fMRIs and things like that. And they've actually discovered that normal people, okay, they read with majority of the time their left side of their brain. We're using generalizations here, but dyslexic people actually read most of the time with their right side of their brain. And so because the reading sort of area is in the left side, it actually has a greater distance to travel across the two hemispheres. And that's why we have trouble decoding words. Even though I just said that dyslexia is a learning disability, okay, that doesn't mean that we can't learn. It means that we just need to learn differently. It just so happens that we have a school system where the majority of people, 90%, can read and take in information in a written format, and we're the 10% that just don't. If we had a school system that, perhaps was designed around more kinesthetic learning, hands-on, or imagine if, everything came in audiobook and reading people were weird or something like that, then we'd be really well suited, and you probably wouldn't even know that we had dyslexia. It's simply because we have this school system that is really, really written based, where it kind of shows our faults in a sense. Now, no one really knows, what causes dyslexia, but it is inheritable, okay? It's genetic. So, it runs in families and things like that. My dad has dyslexia. I've had him on the show before. And, we like to say that it's the gift that keeps on giving through generations, but it does run in families. And I think that's almost kind of a good thing, because then, we don't experience perhaps so much isolation. I know that if my dad wasn't dyslexic, I would have felt really, really misunderstood as a child. I think you know, I connect with him almost on a different level because I know that we think in the same way. So having my dad as a dyslexic sort of normalized it a bit for me. That there are actually many different types of dyslexia. Dyslexia is sort of the umbrella term, and then under that you've got a whole lot of different nuances. So you've got, you know, dyspraxia, which is trouble with coordinating motor movements and handwriting and things like that. And you've got dyscalculia, which is, you know, almost like dyslexia with numbers. And there's, you know, various other ones in between. I actually have normal dyslexia with words and also spatial dyslexia, but you know, there are many different types, and it's important to remember that, you know, there are definitely students out there who have dyslexia and dyspraxia, or dyslexia and dyscalculia, all of which I can't spell. I think something that a lot of teachers and parents and just generally people don't realise is that dyslexia can actually affect something called your executive functions. So it doesn't just kind of affect our reading, writing and spelling, but it can also affect things like organisation. So you might find that, you know, students with dyslexia or people with dyslexia are a little bit disorganised, or have to have really structured things that they have in place so that they can keep on schedule. We have a little bit of trouble with the perception of time and things like telling the time even, or knowing our lefts and rights. There's a couple of other factors that are sort of under the term executive functions. I think I've mentioned this plenty of times in other videos, but it does affect 10% of the population, okay? 2 students in every classroom have dyslexia. So guys, as I always say, you know, you are not alone. There are plenty of people out there who have dyslexia or think in a similar way to you. And you know, it's really, really important to note that you're not alone and that you're not isolated. We are out there. I think just a lot of us are, you know, perhaps not outwardly dyslexic. We're not out of the closet, so to speak. Before we jump into some signs and symptoms, I think it's really important to note that there is no cure for dyslexia, and nor should there be, because dyslexia is not a disease. I really, really want to emphasize that. It's just a different wiring of our brains, guys. You know, that's all it is. We just think differently to other people. And to be honest, if there was a cure, I don't think I would take it. You know, I'm going to talk about some advantages of dyslexia in some future videos. And I just love the ideas that I get from my dyslexia. I love the other skills that I sort of get as a compensatory effect, if you like. I love that I think differently. And that's sort of the point that I hope you all get to with your dyslexia, that you would never want it to go away because you're so proud of it and it makes you who you are. So what should we look out for? You know, what are some signs and symptoms that we might come across for dyslexia? Obviously some of these are more for younger children because we hope that that's when it gets picked up, but it might not get picked up until later on in life. And when it sort of comes to, you know, a later diagnosis, it's usually harder to pick up because that person has coping strategies and things in place to get around their dyslexia. So if you are an adult and you're thinking, you know, you might be dyslexic, some of these things won't relate to you, but in early childhood, learning the alphabet, the association in particular with letter names and their sound that they make is usually quite difficult for dyslexic children to grasp. But I think it's also important to say that, you know, if it's particularly early in the child's development, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're dyslexic. They might just, you know, have a bit of a developmental delay. They might just need a bit of catching up or a different reading program so that they can get to the level of their peers. But these are some things to sort of look out for. Children with dyslexia might have trouble recognizing sounds quickly or words quickly. So if shown on a flashcard, you know, cat, you know, a normal child might see it and go cat, whereas a dyslexic child will see it and go cat. So it's just sort of the timing of things. Short-term memory is sort of affected, so remembering lists of things, and where that short-term memory also sort of comes into play is when you might be teaching a child to sound out their word and then they'll say tack. So they'll remember the last thing that they've sounded out first and say it backwards. That's quite a common issue for dyslexics. Another one that, you know, is pretty well known is seeing letters or drawing letters in reverse. So, you know, B's as D's, P's as Q's, things like that can be an issue. and just the general manipulation of language. So things like rhyming can be quite difficult for dyslexics. Another one is they give you a word like cat, and they say take off the C. What is that word now? And I just had to think about it. It's at, okay? So it's actually manipulating language. So the key factor here is that their reading is going to be really slow. It's going to be really laboured, so they're going to be trying really hard to read something, but not getting a lot of results. So they might be quite inaccurate. So, you know, not knowing the same amount of words perhaps as other children their age. They might have stronger oral skills than written skills, which was definitely a common one for me. That's why I like talking to the camera and I'm not producing a whole lot of articles. I'm a lot better at, you know, verbally delivering information than I am trying to encode it by writing it down. So some other sort of different things to look out for are things like knowing your lefts and rights. I still sort of struggle with this one. I do know it when I think about it, but if it's instantaneous, like if we're driving and Dad suddenly says, go left, I'll go right almost automatically. That's sort of my perceptual thing that's a little bit off. Perceiving time and things like that, like how fast time is traveling, can often be a different one. You know, you'll say come back in 5 minutes and they won't come back for half an hour. That can sort of happen. Being really distracted by auditory and visual stimuli can be quite common. You know, I think I've said before that dyslexia and ADHD sort of go hand in hand. A lot of the time, sorry, this is again generalization, but you know, kids can be quite fidgety and easily distracted, and they might have a lot of trouble sort of remembering lists of things or instructions. So in the classroom, you might find that they need to hear things a number of times for it to actually sink in. That can be quite common. Finally, I think one of the key differences is that, you know, you're going to see some inconsistency with their schoolwork. If the child's at a school level, you're going to see that, you know, in the sort of non-written based subjects, they might be doing really well, and in the written ones, they're not going to be doing so well. So if some of these things are sounding like you or your child or sibling or something like that, probably the next video will be on diagnosis. So I guess it's really for you to weigh up whether or not you look into that process. But you know, if you're having concerns, I don't think it hurts to have, you know, a consultation with a professional, you know, and seek some advice. So I really hope that this video has helped to raise some awareness about dyslexia during our Dyslexia Awareness Week. And I'm going to put the challenge out to all of you to raise some awareness in your own communities. You know, tell one other person in your community about dyslexia and what it is. Might be someone from your, you know, your extended family, might be a friend at school. You know, if you're a teacher, it might be another staff member. Tell another parent. I really encourage you all to find someone else and give your little spiel about dyslexia, raise some awareness within your community. For 10% of the population, guys, it's really important for everyone to be aware of the different learning challenges that, you know, people might face, and to know that we all are really just wired differently. So, you know, spread some awareness, spread some love, and I'll see you next time.